Hello, welcome to the Fiber Circus. This is episode 1. I'm Elizabeth, also known as Spotted Circus on Ravelry, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, although I don't tweet a whole lot. I'm coming to you from southern Indiana, where I run the Spotted Circus, which is a fiber farm and my hand dyeing business, and I also do quite a bit of teaching across the U.S. The podcast is mainly going to be about knitting, spinning, dyeing, machine knitting, because I'm getting into those really, heavily right now. And my adventures in the world of fiber, because I tend to travel quite a bit and do a lot of different fiber things that a lot of people don't normally get to see. So sit back and relax and enjoy the show. So first off, a little bit about me. My husband and I got into alpacas in 2011. Prior to that, I didn't spin, knit, dye, do any of that kind of stuff. I think I knit a few times as a kid, but my mom had to do the casting on, and then all I made was garter stitch scarves, and that was it. So I didn't do a ton of crafting back then, but once we got into alpacas, I decided, you know what, I'm going to learn how to use their fiber. So I took a class on spinning, and I took a class on dyeing, and did quite a bit of research online, and it kind of exploded from there. I'm currently a master sorter, which means that I take fiber mainly from alpacas, but I've done wool as well, and I sort it by a 3-micron range, and also by length, and then by color for commercial purposes. So the sweaters that were 20% alpaca that Ralph Lauren used this last year in the Olympics, I was a part of sorting the fiber that went into those. So it's a really kind of interesting job, and it takes me to quite a few farms that normally I wouldn't get to see. This year in May, I went up to Idaho, Oregon, and then to Colorado, and saw about 2,000 animals in that time over a 3-week period, and sorted the fleece on them. So that was pretty cool. I'm also I'm a certified spin-off judge for the Alpaca Owners Association, so I judge 2 ounces of fiber that owners submit on its processability and on its spinning capabilities. So it kind of gives owners a little bit of feedback on what are they breeding for and what do they need to be looking at when they're looking at their alpaca's fleece. I also tan hides. It's something that came about because of the alpaca farm. We unfortunately lost a baby cria, which is a baby alpaca, pretty early on in our business. And when the baby came out, it was stunning. And of course it died, because when you have livestock, you have dead stock. And I couldn't just put that mother's work, which was almost 12 months worth of gestation, into the ground and waste the fiber on it. So I learned how to skin, and I learned how to tan hides. It's very common in the sheep industry to do it, but in the alpaca industry, not a lot of people have done that before. So I kind of took it upon myself. I watched some YouTube videos and thought, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? If I ruin it, I ruin it. It would have been in the ground anyways. So I took it upon myself to start to learn to do hides, and I have an ebook now out on Amazon about it, and I've done it for a few other people. And they're nice little keepsakes. You could technically make things with them. Right now, I just kind of pet them. They're kind of nice to touch. So sorry about that. I had to go blow my nose, because evidently the second that I start talking, my nose decides to start running too. And if you see my eyes looking off in weird directions, it's because I can't figure out where the teeny tiny little forward-facing camera is on my cell phone. And all my show notes are right down there in the corner too. So let's get on to what it is that I've been working on this week. So knitting-wise, I have a bunch of projects. And a lot of them are actually out of my yarn, because I got in my mind that I needed samples for my shop. Because when I go to vend at places, people are always wondering, well, what does this look like once it's knit up? Well, that's a good question, because I'm a slow knitter. So I've started a bunch of things, and unfortunately, or fortunately in a way, I have a tendency to sell the yarn before I get the object done. So I need to get a little bit quicker about that, hence my machine knitting that's starting up. So the first pair of socks that I have going right now they're called the Geek Socks. And the Geek Socks have this really simple slip stitch pattern on them, minus a stitch marker there. And this is in my sparkle woolly sock base, and the colorway is called Storm Clouds. So you can see it's like a gray, blue, and then a purple, and more of a magenta, and then a black speckly section. I'm working on these on tiny needles. I think that they're 1.25 stitches. And the Geek Sock pattern is actually written from top down, and I do toe up, because that way if I get tired of knitting on them, I could just quit halfway through. I have the heel done. This is the Fish Lips Kiss heel. It's one of the few I've knit where they actually fit me normally. I was working on these while I was at the Super Summer Knit Together retreat recently, and I went all out and I bought this sock ruler that was going to tell me when to stop and when to start my heel. And I totally didn't circle the right number to start on, so I'd blown past the heel by like an inch, and so I had to rip it all back. I also got a really cute little progress keeper here that I got at SSK, and it's a little bitty California that some nice person gave to me as part of the stitch marker swap. And it's really cute, but it's also motivating me to say, hey, knit faster, you're not going very quick. So I'm working on those currently, and those are living in a bag by, if I remember right, it's Little Skein and the Big Wool. So this is part of the Knit More Girls Choose Your Own Adventure. So it has like the Kingdom of Hand Knit Sweaters, and then you have Sleeve Island back here. Let's see what else. Oh, the Land of Yarn Chicken, I've played that before too, and it's not very fun. So that's one of the first things that I'm knitting on. I think I have 2 skeins of that right now in my shop, if you really like it. Hopefully I'm going to have to dye more now that I'm actually getting a sample of it done. The second thing that I have on my needles is a direct result of going to the SSK Knit Together retreat. It's hosted by the Knit Girls, Laura and Leslie, and it's down in Nashville, Tennessee in July. I was lucky this year and got selected to be a vendor there, and as a result, I also signed up to go to the retreat. And part of the retreat is they have a try-it-on room where everybody brings their hand knits that they've actually finished, and you're able to try them on and see how do they fit you, is this something you'd even like to make. You know, some of it's just entertaining. There was probably at least 100 sweaters, if not more there, and a lot of them were in larger lady sizes, which I totally appreciate. And one of the ones I tried on was the Portage sweater. It's by Melissa Schaschwary, and this is the Portage. And it's a pretty simple cardigan that has some nice little pockets at the end. And then the back is actually all completely this like honeycomb design that you start knitting. I tried it on and I was like, ooh, I could totally finish this, seeing as how I've like knit a sweater, you know. So I started eyeballing my own yarn, which unfortunately when you hand dye, it's very easy to just walk out to your product booth and say, oh, look what I have. So I said, well, if this yarn doesn't sell at SSK, I'm going to take it, and it's going to be mine. So it's a new to me base that I've just recently started dyeing. It's a DK weight, and it's 100% Polwarth, and it's 325 yards per skein, and I called the colorway the Neon Mermaid. So I've started on it, and I'm about 2 rows away from splitting for the sleeves, actually. So here's the back side of it. Oh, it goes this way, upside down. So here's the neck, and as you can see, there's all this cabling detail all the way across the back. And here's your sleeves and then your front, so it comes out around you as a little cardigan. So I bet I've got 3, 6, about 10 inches maybe into it right now. One of the classes that I took at SSK was all about fixing lace mistakes with Laura Nelkin, and it came in very handy because I had a section right in here where I had screwed up one cable cross roughly in the middle, and as a result an entire row was off, and it was 6 rows down. So what I did was I actually took 34 stitches right here, dropped them completely off the needles, and dropped down 5 rows and fixed it. And now you really can't even tell where that was happening at. Well, except for this wonky spot right here. And that's because the tension just needs to be blocked out when I'm working on it. So I'm doing pretty decent at it. I'm knitting kind of monogamously on it right now, which is a good thing because I tend to get distracted easily and then I start on a whole new project. I have a cute little progress keeper from Rick at Whimzee Stitches, a little rainbow ball. And the bag that it's living in is actually one of his bags as well. I vended next to Rick at the SSK Marketplace, and he is Whimzee Stitches on Etsy. And I'd actually seen him before out at SAF as well. But he had this really cute llama bag, and it's clear, you know, a drawstring. And of course I am a sucker for anything that's llama related. So there's Rick's tag. So Whimzee Stitches Designs. He's a really fun guy. He's from New Orleans, and he does a lot of really nice project bags. So if you're in the mood or market for a project bag, it comes with a strap, so you can carry it around pretty easily. This is his smaller sock size, and it's got 2 big skeins in it right now. Eventually I'm going to have to move up to a larger bag, but for right now it's working out for me. So my next project, I have a single crochet project, because this is about all the crochet that I can do. But I have an Eternal sock yarn blanket that's being knit on being crocheted on an Addy 2.0 hook, which from what I understand is pretty small. So back in the day I used to contribute to the Fat Fiber box quite a bit, and I would get all my yarn samples, and I just kind of sit there going, what am I going to do with, 20 some odd yards of sock yarn? And so I decided to make a sock yarn blanket. So the center is actually Wollmeise, because that was what I had on hand, but this is the only stitch that I really know how to do. But it went from covering a hamster to at least like my lap now, and it's one of those just eternal projects where I'm continually working on it, just whenever I get bored. It's something that's really easy for me to work on because my mind doesn't have to work. Right now I'm actually into Knitpicks palette. I got a palette sampler a few years ago, so I'm working through different colors of palette because I don't have any more sock yarn minis, but I'm sure I will eventually. So that's just my one and only crochet project. I've tried some other crochet things. I made a Lorenzo the Llama, which is supposed to be this cute little Mowery toy that's like a llama. And when I finished him, he looked like he had rickets. He kind of stood sideways with one leg up in the back and one leg down. My niece didn't really care because she's only like 1. But looking at it, yeah, crochet's not for me. So let's see. Another project that I've got on the needles, and this is kind of a work in progress shaming episode as well, to try to get me to get going on a few of these things. I'm working currently on the Emelyn Mae shawl. It's by Jennifer Lassonde, who's Boston Jen. It's being knit out of my alpaca silk, and it's a 80% alpaca and 20% mulberry silk. And it's got this pretty lace pattern here in the center, and it's 2 colors. It's a rose gray and a silver gray. And I've made pretty good progress. I'm past the center, which was this panel here, and then, I'm working to the side. The problem is I upgraded my cell phone, and when I upgraded my cell phone, I thought that everything was going to transfer with it. And I had a marker in there, and it was showing me where I was in this pattern, and that marker disappeared. So now I'm trying to figure out where on earth I am in this pattern, and in theory, I can kind of eyeball where I am if I fold it from the center, and I'm like here-ish versus out here. But the problem is I'm not exactly sure where I'm at for repeats, so I really just need to sit down and actually work on it a little bit more. These are being knit on Addies. Don't really know what size they are. They look like maybe a 5 or 6. Probably. I know they're not my 7s because I'm using my 7s on my Portage sweater at the moment. So this is really soft though. It's got a really nice halo to it. And the mulberry silk just makes it drape gorgeously. So once again, another shop sample. And once again, I'm almost out of yarn prior to finishing it. Good try. I also have one more sweater in progress, which hasn't seen a lot of work from me recently, and it's mainly because I've gotten distracted and it's hot. But what I'm working on actually is the Evenflo Sweater by Locatelli. And it's a really cute little open front cardigan. It's knit in sport weight, and that could be why it's taken me a while, because I'm not the smallest girl in the world. And I'm also attempting to manage 3 balls at once, which isn't going as planned. So currently, I got past the armpits, and I'm headed down the back quite a ways. And the yarn is Madelintosh Pashmina in the Spectrum colorway, so it's a merino silk cashmere yarn. So it'll be really pretty when I'm finished. I'm still on the first 3 balls. I got more to go, unfortunately. And it's just taking a little bit longer than planned because it's quite a few stitches in straight stockinette with these like elongated slip stitches, and the problem is I'm really slow at purling, so every row back I gotta purl and it just takes forever. It's currently being knit on a US size 6, and those are on Carbon's needles. And this bag came to me out of Canada, and it's a bag maker that I love to follow because she just tends to have some really cool stuff that I like. And her name is Gingersnapthat, and she's on Etsy as Gingersnapthat, and it's a cat sushi bag. I mean, who doesn't like angry cats cutting up sushi? I saw the fabric when she had it, and I was like, oh, I need a big old bag. And so this bag just makes me happy. I like to look at it. It's got a nice handle too. I always like a good handle on a bag. Oh, and the bag that my Emelyn Mae is in is another Whimzee Stitches, and I got this from him last year at SAF. And it's just really cute little monsters. It was a Halloween themed bag. I really like the little werewolf. He's a very dapper werewolf with his bow tie. Something else that I am casting on for, because, you know, I'd obviously need another project to work on, is I've been eyeballing a fade type sweater for a while, by Andrea and Mowery, and I really like the Comfort Fade, because I like a cardigan. I don't like a full out sweater, because if I get hot, I want to be able to flap my arms and cool off a little bit. The problem is this is written for sport weight, and I didn't want sport weight. But what I found was, down at the SSK retreat, we went on a 3-hour tour of 3 different yarn shops. We went to Craft South, we went to Bliss Yarns, and then House of Yarn. And I did really good. I was driving 4 other wonderful ladies around with me, and I really didn't buy anything at the first 2 shops, because, you know, what do I need extra yarn for? I can dye yarn. And then I went into House of Yarn, and House of Yarn had Wollmeise. And I like me some Wollmeise because it's German. And it's something I don't commonly see in the wild. So, I got these 2. And then this one. And I thought, ooh, those 3 would look good together as a fade. The problem is, they're fingering weight, not sport weight. And I really don't like to do math. However, I'm going to have to suck it up. Because I did a swatch. And so I started here at the top color, and then worked my way into the middle, and then down into the bottom. And I think it looks really nice together. I'm slightly worried that I'm not going to have enough yarn, so I found another skein of Wollmeise that's more in just the greens and yellows, on Ravelry on a D-stash that's coming to me. And that would make me feel a little bit more comfortable to make sure that I have enough. So, yeah. This is probably going to be in the works at some point, and I'm going to have to do some math probably. I'd really like to figure out how to do the cardigan on my knitting machine, because I can cruise on that thing, and it would be so much faster, but I need time to sit down and do it. So maybe this winter, but it's a work in progress. It'll eventually happen. So past that, let's see. I think those are all my current works in progress. I have a Viajante in lace, like alpaca lace that I'm working on, and it hasn't gotten very much work because it's like 4,000 yards, I think, or 2,000 yards of lace. In reality, is it going to get done? Probably not, but I started it, so it's getting there. So now we'll go on to finished objects. So, I can't say I was working on these on the last episode, because I wasn't. So, in reality, here's what I finished in the last couple of weeks. So, as part of the Super Summer Knit Together retreat, you could knit things done by designers that were coming to teach there. And if you used a vendor's yarn, me, you could get extra points. And all these points got you into drawings for wonderful things. So I cast on for the Frozen Lake Shawl by Kirsten Kapur, and I used one of my gradients. It's a merino nylon gradient in the neon rainbow colorway. And then the second yarn is a speckled yarn that I did. And I was going to get it done, and I finished it 2 days before SSK, only to realize that the knit together, or knit along, ended like 4 days prior. So, nice try. But I finished it at least. So, you can see it started up here in the corner, and it's a big triangular shawl that goes through oranges and pinks, and then green, blue, purple, and black. And then there's actually a row of teeth up along the edge. I like the pattern though. Once you blocked it, it showed up quite a bit better. And I kind of like the speckling with it, because the speckle just happens to add little bitty pops of color here and there. I think in a gray it would also look really pretty, but it's a nice size. You know, it's a good size shawl that you can wear pretty easily. Just kind of tuck out around you, or put it on the side. You can look fashionable that way. I like it because it's neon. And once again, this is a yarn that I was trying to show. Here's what you can do with a neon gradient and a speckle. And I have more of it now, at least in stock, but it's now on a sparkly base instead of just the plain base. But it took 2 skeins. It was about 800 yards of fingering weight. I like the shawl though. It's cute. It'll be nice and warm, and it'll be a nice display piece for when I go out to SAF in October. And it was an easy knit once you got going on it. Just figuring it out in the beginning, you know, it's like any pattern. You've got to start memorizing what's going on with it. The other thing that I finished has to do with my knitting machine. So I have an antique circular sock machine that's like 100 and some odd years old. I bought it originally because I wanted to be able to dye up gradients and alpaca bases, because you can't buy sock blanks to dye gradients in alpaca. It worked. I could never get the gauge quite right to make a sock on it, so I got a little frustrated with it, and that's when I started looking into flatbed knitting machines. And it turned out that I had a great aunt who actually used to do commission knitting down in Texas of baby sweaters on machines, and she had something like 4 of them. And at the same time, there was a estate sale north of Indianapolis a little ways, and they had like 6 knitting machines there. And I was like, ooh, this might be a thing. So I went over to my great aunt's and learned about it, and I went home with a bulky machine and a standard gauge machine at that point. I have a Brother 890 punch card and a Brother 260 punch card bulky. That led me up to the estate sale up in north of Indianapolis, where I then picked up a standard gauge Toyota and some other accessories after I started digging through the estate, because it was a house where you could like walk a path and that was it. And the more I got to digging, the more I kept finding, and the better deals I kept finding, because, you know, the family didn't want it, and they really didn't know what some of the stuff was in the first place, and it really wasn't with the machine it went with. So I got some pretty good deals there. And then I was headed to teach a class in Florida and saw an ad on Facebook for another estate sale that had knitting machines, and I may have gone home with another 2 or 3 from there, but it was a crazy deal. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5 standard gauge, which would be roughly a light fingering to sport. And I only have 1 bulky machine, and then I have 1 that's in the middle, and it's going to be sold because I don't want it. But I have all these extra accessories too that I'm just now starting to go through. And a lot of the patterns are totally from the 80s, where they've got puff sleeves, or they have like knit slogans that say, "I love bowling," and you sew it into a sweatshirt in the middle, because that's very fashionable. I also have some punch cards, which are what does the patterning on the machines, and they are actually those geese with the hearts that used to be big back in like the late 80s, early 90s. They're kind of funny to look through some of these old patterns and go, wow, who ever dressed their kid in that? It's perfect fodder though for ugly Christmas sweaters, and my little niece is totally gonna get one this year, probably with raccoon heads and a cat that's winking and kicking a ball at the same time, because who doesn't need a sweater with that on it? I also did find actually a color work booklet that's all the A-team. So someday Mr. T is going to be on the front of a sweater, in my opinion, and I think that would be an awesome one for SSK. So on the flatbed knitting machines, basically you're limited by 200 needles, and you can do all sorts of patterning. I have both electric machines, which you can hook in through the computer and do designing in there, and they also have about 900 patterns stored on there as far as lace, and different styles. They're called slip stitching and tuck stitching. And then you can also add a ribber on the front, which allows you to knit circularly. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be able to make socks this way. This is going to go great. So my first sock that I knit, I made ribbing, and then I turned it. I made the ribbing flat, and then I had to actually join the ribbing into a circle. And so I did that, and I made a heel, and I was like, all right, I'm doing awesome. And after the heel, I kept going, and it got a little bit harder to move the carriage back and forth. And I was like, I wonder why this is happening. Well, then I finished it, and I was like, yes, I made a sock. I'm so proud. I took the sock off, and about the last 3/4 of the foot was solid knitting. I had gone from knitting in a circle to knitting straight ribbing back and forth. So I went to go put my foot in the sock, and it made it to the heel and started out and stopped because it was solid fabric. I was like, well, nice try, but it didn't quite work. So when I had a little bit more time, I decided I'm going to try this again. And I was like, you know, what I did it on with the gauge, because the gauge is relative to a dial that's on there and it changes your stitch length. I said, well, I'm going to try something slightly different. I looked up 4 or 5 patterns online, and I found a sock calculator that if I put in what my gauge was, it was going to give me the exact pattern to make a sock that would fit me perfectly. And I believed it. Once again, don't believe everything that the internet tells you, because it told me to cast on 88 stitches. And I sat there thinking, 88 stitches sounds like an awful lot. I mean, my normal knitting stitching, I think, is like 64 to 68. I'm like, 88 sounds kind of big. But I went with it. You know, trust in the internet, they will never lie. So I made a sock. And this is my sock. As you see, there's ribbing up at the top. I did a 2x2 ribbing. And so the ribbing is knitted flat. And then you have to pick up half the stitches and hang them on the river bed. So that way it's knitting around and around in a circle. And you can see this is definitely a circle. Look, I can put my hand into it. And there's a real heel. See, a nice square heel, and there aren't very big gaps at the side. And then there's actually a toe, a foot, and then there's a real toe, which is still being held together with waste yarn, because I haven't stitched it up. And why haven't I stitched it up? Because this sock will fit Hodor from Game of Thrones, like aka Andre the Giant. It's huge. Like, even for my hand, it's huge. And there's a funny loop there, but ignore that. It got caught. So, lesson learned. My foot is not 88 stitches out around. In fact, I could probably do without about 1.5 inches on either side, and we could fix that. So, sock number 2. I'll just rip it out and try it again. This colorway, though, is my Victorian Christmas tree colorway. And you can see here's the stump for the Christmas tree. And there's the tree and the lights. And a tiny little star at the top. And I knew that if I didn't knit up a sample of this, people would look at it in the skein and go, Christmas tree? So, yeah, I made a sock. Doesn't fit, but it's a lesson learned. I have also made a sweater on the sock machine, or on the knitting machine. I used Amy Herzog's Custom Fit because it does everything in pieces. So it did the front in one piece, the back in one piece, and then the arms is a piece. And I made a sweater, about 1,600 yards worth of fingering weight on it. And had I not screwed up a few times, it probably would have taken me 3 or 4 days at the most. But I got frustrated because little tiny things would go wrong. And once they went wrong, I'd just say, screw this, and take it off, and I'd start all over again. So the back of the sweater I ripped out probably 7 times. So the yarn was really durable, which is good. It took that. I'm not thrilled with how it fits. I mean, it actually fits my body. That's half the battle. But it's longer in the back than it is in the front. And there's a row counter, so I'm not really sure how that happened. So long term, I'll probably rip it out, start all over again. I did make some tiny little armbands because I did demo how to use the knitting machine at SSK, just to kind of show people what all it could do. And I may have gotten Mr. Hipstrings of the Hipstrings Yarn and Fiber Company into a knitting machine as well. He went home the next week and bought one. So if you have any questions about knitting machines, let me know, because I've looked at quite a few of them now, and I can tell you what you're missing or what's probably wrong. So in the future, there's going to be a lot of that. I applied to do a festival or a one-day show here locally that's a Christmas show, and it's all finished goods. And I won't know until like beginning of October if I get in. And if I get in, it's at the end of November. And so I've got to turn out a bunch of finished goods. So I'll be knitting all sorts of IU hats and IU scarves and stuff on the knitting machine. And so hopefully by then I will have figured it all out. We'll see. So I think those are my only 2 finished items for this week. Moving into spinning, while at the retreat I did a bit of spinning because I had time, to hang out with people when I wasn't taking classes. And I also, the week prior to that, I was at the National Alpaca Fiber Extravaganza, where I was doing demos and teaching a dyeing class and a drum carding class. So I had plenty of time to demo what a spinning wheel was there. So my current main spinning wheel is the Spinolution Firefly, and I'm a Spinolution dealer. Previously I had a Hansen, and I was actually burning the motor out on the Hansen. So I upgraded to the Firefly, and I've been pretty happy with it since. So this is what I'm spinning right now. So this is, it's my merino stained glass base, and it's called stained glass because it looks kind of like stained glass. And there's also Firestar in there, so there's a little bit of sparkle. But this is in the neon rainbow colorway, so it runs through all the colors of the rainbow. And I've just finished spinning the singles on it. So this is a 16-ounce bobbin, and you can see it's not all the way full. I mean, there's a good sized chunk on it. In theory, I want to make this into socks. However, I don't think that my spinning is probably fine enough to do socks. Because if I do this back as a 3-ply, I think it's going to be pretty fat socks if I do that. So I'm not real sure how I'm going to ply it yet, so it's just kind of been sitting around. I may end up Navajo plying it, so that way I can maintain the color repeats in it. Most of these colors will glow underneath a black light too, so if I do that, that would be kind of a cool scarf for somebody maybe. So, not 100% sure, but the spinning's pretty good. It's nice and even, which I'm pretty happy with. And it is pretty sparkly. It's kind of hard to catch on here, but Firestar is a nylon, so the thought that it's 21 micron merino and Firestar should be almost a sock blend. So we'll see. So that's my main spinning that I'm working on currently. Let's see, I'll do a quick update as far as what's going into the shop right now. My Etsy shop is currently open, and it is loaded with the majority of stuff that I have at the moment. So something new that I've put in this week is once again on the stained glass base. And this is called Tropics. It's a really nice fluorescent-y orange with a bright tealy aqua color. You can kind of see the Firestar in it. Right there, you definitely can. So this is something that's new as a colorway in the shop. It should be pretty popular because I had 3 video podcasters buy it all at the same time and talk about doing a spin along, which would be awesome. I wouldn't complain about that. So this is my new thing. I'll probably start putting shop updates mainly at the end, so that way if you don't really care about that, you don't have to watch it. So now on to SSK. So I went to the Super Summer Knit Together retreat put on by Laura and Leslie of the Knit Girls with 3 L's. They have a video podcast, and I've known them, I want to say 2011 or 2012 is when I first started watching the podcast. It was pretty near the beginning when I started watching. And then I actually met Laura down at, it was a fiber festival down in Mississippi, and it was hotter than all get out, and she was teaching her first class there, I think, as well. And then I met him a few more years at SAF, and I'd see him at Dixon, Tennessee, and at Kentucky here and there. So they've become somewhat good friends, and they're very entertaining. I actually vended, I think it was at the second SSK. I didn't attend, but I just did a vending there. And my schedule and me spacing out on applying just hadn't worked out recently. So I applied to go this year. And once I got in, I thought, maybe I should actually go to the retreat. You know, because I didn't go to the retreat the last time, but I keep hearing how everybody loves it. And I said, okay, this time I'm going to go. So I applied and I got in. And I vended there on Saturday. So thanks to everybody who came along and bought something. To those of you that didn't, I hope you at least looked and saw something you might like for somebody else. So I took 2 classes while I was there. They had a lot of great teachers. They had Laura Nelkin, Isabel Kramer, Kristen Kapur, Esther Rogers from Jazz Turtle, and then Gail from Gail's Art. And one of the classes that I took was the Fixing Lace class with Laura Nelkin. Because I've screwed up lace before, and I've either just gotten mad and abandoned the project, or I've decided, okay, we'll continue along and just leave the mistake, because it's like the Amish say with the quilts, nothing is perfect except for God. So if I leave it, nobody will probably notice it. I took that class, and it was super helpful. The way that she approached fixing lace made sense, and it made it approachable and easy to do. She does have a Craftsy class on this topic, and I'd really suggest taking it because it doesn't apply to just lace. Like you saw on my Portage cardigan, I dropped 34 stitches, 5 rows, so that's a ton of stitches, and it was all 1x1 cabling, and I was able to then fix it all and get back to where I needed to be with it. So, you know, it was definitely a worthwhile class to take. So then the second class that I took, let me get a drink here. The second class I took was painting sock blanks with Gail of Gail's Art. And I took it because, I mean, I love to do sock blanks. I think they're a lot of fun. I like to do self-striping and gradients. I do my gradients that way, but I don't do my self-striping that way. But I'd always seen her sock blanks and wondered, how is she getting that to work? And in my mind, what I really want to do is to have sock blanks with SpottedCircus on it and like all sorts of circus things on it. So, because that's kind of my thing, you know, the SpottedCircus. So I took the class, and she gave us 3 mini sock blanks, and then she gave us the tools and the techniques on how to do it. So I decided if I'm going to make 3 mini ones, they're all going to coordinate with each other. So I was the weirdo in the room, and I chose the monster faces. So I dyed the background of the sock blanks and then stenciled on these monster faces, and then I'm calling them bloody spots. They're more like splotches of red. So I did that one, and I used the same monster face on all of them. Then I did this little guy, and then I did this one. Now, will I make them into socks? Maybe. We'll see. When it's knit up, it would obviously go variegated with like the green and then splotches of the red here and there. So when you knit a sock blank, you're not going to see the monster's face in the socks unless you're knitting something that's this exact gauge and width, in which case you're probably making a scarf. It was a really neat class though. We did these on superwash merino, which does take dye differently than alpaca, but my goal is to be able to eventually do them on alpaca-based sock blanks. And that led to the purchase of a Cricut, because, you know, it's not like they have a lot of alpaca stencils out there for me to be able to make these with. So I've been that came just yesterday, and I've been experimenting with it, trying to figure out how to get it to cut out the right spots. And it isn't going quite as planned, but it'll get there eventually. I do have a husband that's a graphic designer, so in theory, he should be able to just lay all this stuff out for me just like I want it and get it done for me. But husbands, they work on their own time schedule. So at some point in the future, look for some really awesome sock blanks that I'll be doing. A few other things that I got at SSK. There was a really neat a place where if you had yarn that you didn't like, you could drop it off, and then you could like pick up some. So like a tradesy spot. I had some superwash Wool of the Andes bulky that I used for a novelty that I made, and it was so scratchy for me and I hated it. So I abandoned all the rest of it there and said, please God, somebody else take it. And somebody did. So later when I was walking by, I saw that somebody had left some Shelter Quarry there, which is a chunky weight, 200 yards, and it's a Targhee Columbia wool. And this is in the citrine colorway. And it's a big fat, looks like it's plied. Yeah, it's a 2-ply. So somebody left 2 skeins of it. And I was like, oh, bonus, it's mine. So I snagged it up. It's not the softest wool in the world, but it's very durable and hard wearing. So I have 400 yards of it. I I'm guessing it'll probably become a hat of some sort. So I thought that was a pretty awesome trade. I'm all about some quarry. Then the other thing, there was an area where you could actually sell stuff. If you had like quantities of yarn and you wanted to just sell it and say, hey, somebody want to buy my stuff, let's take it. So I wandered through because, yeah, do I really need yarn? Probably not. But I saw this teal yarn there, and I got to looking at the fiber content, and it's a 70 merino, 15% alpaca, 15% yak, and it's from Lion brand. I didn't know the Lion brand did merino, yak, and alpaca like that. It's a worsted weight, kind of tealy. There's a couple of guard hairs sticking out, but it's not like crazy itchy, which for Lion brand, I'm kind of like, wow. So there's 126 yards in each ball, and it's a worsted weight. And I got like a sweater's quantity for like 15 or 20 bucks. So that's a pretty awesome deal. It hasn't been made into anything yet, obviously, but it's something where I'm going to just sit and think about it for a little while and decide, what does this want to be? It'll probably be a cardigan, whatever it is, because I don't like sweaters that have throats that kill you off. And I did do a little bit of shopping when I was at the marketplace. So I was vending there, and if you're vending, you do get to shop from each other's booths early, so that way you get to get some awesome stuff. I got the Llama bag from Whimzee Stitches, and I also picked up this really awesome octopus bag. And it is a work in progress bag from Star Knits. And she's pretty awesome. She has a podcast called The Weasley Sisters, and they cover a lot of Harry Potter House Cup stuff, which I don't do. But she does some really cool spinning with sweater mashups, where she combines a lot of different braids, and yet it somehow comes out looking really coordinated and nice. So the inside has this pretty sparkly stuff, and then it's got 2 big pockets on the inside too. So I thought this was a really nice bag, and it was really unique, and I just kind of was feeling the octopuses right then. And we did a tradesy, so she went back with some stuff too. So that was one of the first things that I did. And then I only bought one thing of fiber, but I bought it because I'd never spun anything from Hobbledehoy. So Ross Farms had Hobbledehoy stuff there because she wasn't able to vend. And so I got these rocket batlings, which are merino wool, silk, bamboo, and sparkle from Hobbledehoy Fibers. And they're these cute little teeny tiny bats. See, they're just little tiny balls of fluff. And I just really was liking the colors when I looked at it. And I was like, you know what? I can do something with that. It's only 2 ounces, so I'm not real sure what I'm going to do with that. But I thought they were really pretty. So that was my only fiber purchase. But then I fell down the hole at Stranded Dye Works. And I knew I was going to. If you don't know who Lady Amy is, she has Stranded Dye Works, and she is the Stranded podcast from the UK. She's a wonderful lady. I was so thrilled to get to meet her finally in person because she's hilarious. And I totally offered for her to move in on my alpaca farm, and she could camp out in the backyard if she wanted to. But there's a little issue of a green card, which, hey, we can figure that out later. So she actually was the dyer for the goodie bag that you got at the retreat. So this is the yarn that she dyed up for the retreat. It's on her Superwash Merino singles base, and it's called 4224. It's actually the amount of miles between her house and Scarrett Bennett, where the festival happened at. And I thought it's not normally my colors, but I think it's really pretty. It's kind of like a light mint chippy green with some spots of orange and like flecks of rust. Long term, probably going to make a cowl with it because it's pretty soft. And then I had a request from a friend who didn't get to meet Lady Amy that really wanted to get some of her yarn. And she said, get me something blue or purple. So I did. Jeannie McLeod, if you're watching, this is your skein. And it's Oasis. It's a superwash merino nylon in the colorway Blue Rinse. Don't know what Jeannie's going to make out of it, but she'll be happy that she gets it. And then, so I finally started shopping for me. So those 2 things weren't for me at all. So that's not stash enhancement. But these all kind of are. She has these 2 colors that I just thought went really, really well together. They're called Smoked and House Red. It's a superwash merino nylon cashmere base. And I can just see this as kind of like some colorwork mittens maybe. I think that could be really pretty together. And they're kind of like tonal solids, but I really was digging those colors. And then I walked by again later, about halfway through the day when traffic was a little bit slow, and I saw another one. I said, oh, I like that one too. So this is Magpie. Same base, superwash merino cashmere nylon. And I may be nice to actually make something for my husband out of this. Because they're kind of dude-ish colors, you know, with the blues and the blacks and stuff. It'd make a really pretty sockhead hat or a cowl. Could do some mittens. I could make him socks, but he didn't really honor the last pair of socks that I made him very well. So, you know, you aren't going to get a whole lot if you don't appreciate the knitting. So I got those, and then part of the retreat with those tickets that you got put in for door prizes. And one of the things I won as a door prize was the Skein Desert Vista Dye Works. It's their sock weight in the Crystal Ball Frappuccino, and it's a self-striping colorway evidently. They're a little bit paler than what I normally would choose, but it's Desert Vista Dye Works, and I'd never tried any other stuff, and everybody raves about it. And there's a lot of green in there, and I like green. So, long term, probably socks. And then, let's see, I was vending right next to Vesper Sock, and I'd always heard rave things about her as well, so I said, oh, let's look and see what she's got. So she actually had samples knit up all her socks, because she's a professional, unlike me. And she had this really cool stripy rainbow with some speckles in it, and it's called Unicorn Mane. And so this is Vesper Socks from Knitterly Things, and it's a superwash merino nylon. And it's pretty, it's nice and bright, and you can see some of the speckles in it. So that'll eventually become socks for me. And the last thing I got there was from Junk Yarns. And I had never met Junk Yarns before, but I'd heard about them as well. And they had a lot of really pretty speckles in their colors. And so what I got was, this is called Virginia. It's on their smooth sock base. It's a 4-ply superwash merino nylon with 463 yards. And this just really appealed to me. There's something about the green and the brown in here that I just really liked. And it's not something that I would probably normally dye. So, not real sure what it's going to become, except for pretty stash right now. There's some really pretty speckles deep down in there. So it's actually a pretty complex colored inside. So I liked it. And the last thing that I got, which was from House of Yarn, they had a somewhat local dyer called a Whimsical Wood Yarn Company. And it's on their Pixie Toes based. It's a merino nylon. And I kind of bought it because it's called Freak Show. And it's just full of crazy fun and aqua colors, you know. Once again, not real sure what it's gonna be. Maybe some mittens. I like to make mittens. They're pretty quick. I'm really slow at socks, even though I have this idea that I'm gonna knit all these socks. So we'll see. I'm getting really good at sockhead hats and sockhead cowls because they're really mindless and you just go till you run out. So those are kind of my default pattern. The last thing that I got, and I didn't actually get this, the woman who organized the 3-hour tour of all the yarn shops heard me raving about how much I like Wollmeise, and she said, oh, you like Wollmeise? I have a skein of brown Wollmeise at home. Would you be interested in it? I'm like, well, yeah. So the next day she brought me in this really pretty skein, and the colorway is called Kakoa. And it's in their 80/20 superwash wool nylon base. So thank you so much, Joe. Awesome. I love my Wollmeise. This right here is my little bitty Wollmeise stash, and it'll go beautiful in there for when it is I decide to start doing something with those. So that's the majority of my SSK recap. It was a really good retreat. If you get the chance at all to go to it, I really would highly recommend it. Besides, you know, some of the podcasters and stuff that I knew there previously, I didn't know a whole lot of people, but going into it, you could sit down at any table and start chatting with people and say, hey, my name's Elizabeth. I raise alpacas. What do you do? It was great to be able to talk with them. There was people from Canada. I had a woman from Alaska riding around with me in my van, and that was pretty awesome. Some New Orleans ladies. And it was a really wide age gamut, too. There was probably late 20s up into, not to be insulting, but 60s or 70s is my guess. There was a really interesting gamut of people. And everybody was doing something a little bit different, which was kind of fun. It was neat to see people knitting in different methods. There was some Portuguese arm knitting, like lever style knitting, which I had never seen before. And just watching how different people carried their yarn was kind of entertaining. It was a really good event, though. And by the time the closing ceremonies came around, several people got up and started talking about what being able to get together with people who understood what you were dealing with and what you were crafting with. Started talking and sharing their stories, and that's when everybody started to get the feelings. So my only complaint about the retreat is that there weren't enough Kleenex boxes around for when you got the feelings, and not everybody wants their feelings to show so much. So next time, more Kleenexes. Maybe those should be in the goodie bags, so that way when everybody has to leave, you can just whip out your Kleenexes and get rid of your feelings. So it was really great, though. I met a lot of really interesting people, a lot of new podcasters who I had never heard of, that do some interesting podcasts from all across the country, and I talked with them about how to do their podcast, and most of them were just like, hey, just upload it to YouTube. That's all you need. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So that's how it is. I kind of got into all that. Upcoming trips. Next week I go for a day and a half, probably up to Chicago area, where I'm going to be sorting fiber for an alpaca farm. And then mid-August, I'm going out to New Jersey, and then up into the Buffalo area to do some classes up there. So for those of you that don't know, I do quite a bit of teaching around the U.S. as well. I teach alpaca owners how to take their fiber from here it is off the animal and raw to what can you process on your own, what can't you process on your own, and what do you need to send off to a mill. And then we go through how to dye it, how to wash it, dyeing yarn, dyeing fiber reactive bamboo, and then we do blending on the second day, where we take drum carders and we blend one specific alpaca fleece with 10 or 12 different fibers. So that way they can really see, what's going to be the difference between adding mint fiber and adding bamboo versus mulberry silk and tussa silk. So I like to get out there and do those kinds of classes because it's a lot of fun to get owners to where they feel more empowered to do things on their own. So I think that's about it for this week. I'm going to try to clip in at the end here a visit out to the sideshow, which is where our critters live. We have currently one Teeswater sheep named Ted, who's going to be the featured performer this week, whether he wants to or not. I have a Pygora goat named Bruce. Then we have 3 llamas. We have a woolly llama, a Silky, and a Surrey llama. And then I think we have 12 or 14 alpacas, if I remember right. Mainly girls. We have a bunch of older girls currently because, they kind of have a home for life. So we have 3 right now that are 17 plus. I had one go to 22 last year, and she was an original import out of Peru. And unfortunately, it got to the point where her teeth just weren't able to keep her going, and so she couldn't keep weight on. So they can live up to 22 with the right care. We should have, I think, 3 babies coming this year. We should have a llama and I think 2 alpacas, maybe 3 alpacas. We're hoping that's all that we're having coming because we had a breakout last year. And we looked up in the pasture and Mr. Speckles, who's our big Appaloosa llama, was up in the girls' pasture eating food. And I said, oh, he shouldn't be up there. And we went out, and Mr. Speckles had jumped on the gate and broken the latch and invited all of his boys to hang out with all the girls. And alpacas, unlike cats and dogs, will ovulate whenever they have some action. So we felt around after we got the boys and girls separated again, and we thought that we felt the girls that maybe had a little too much action, and we gave them a shot to hopefully prevent that. The problem is we didn't give everyone a shot because we didn't think everyone needed it. But there's one girl who looks a little fat, and that worries me a little bit because she's an alpaca, and she would have had access to her choice of an alpaca boy, a llama boy, or a Surrey alpaca boy, which was not the plan. So we're kind of hoping she's just fat right now. If she's not, we'll probably find out by the end of August, because the breakout happened mid-August last year. And their gestation is a little over 11 months, and it can go upwards of a year, depending upon the alpaca. So hopefully we'll have a few babies later on this year that we'll be able to go out and visit. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Once again, I'm Ravelry. I'm Spotted Circus. On Instagram, I'm Spotted Circus. On Facebook, I'm Spotted Circus Alpacas and Llamas. Or you can email me at spottedcircusalpacas@yahoo.com. So hopefully you've enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next time. Bye. So this is our sideshow performer of the week. This is Ted. Ted's a Teeswater. I think he's about 4.5 to 5 years old. He came to me through Susan of Susan's Fiber Shop, for those of you who might know Susan. As you see, Ted has curly little locks. Right now, he's only got about 3 months worth of growth on him, so there's not a lot of locks on him yet. But normally, he's got about, I'd say, 9 to 10 inches of locks. I sell him primarily for doll hair or for Nuno felters, art yarn spinners. Starting this winter, he'll actually get a coat on him, because as you can see, he likes to stick his head in the middle of the hay. And he's very finicky. God forbid he stays around for the performance. Ted weighs about 260 pounds right now, so he's actually the biggest thing on the farm.